If you're like me and the current hyped romantasy just isn't working for you, then you should read these books with romantic subplots instead. For Valentine's this year, I thought I would give you my romantic subplots you can root for 2.0. This is a video I made a couple of years ago now, so definitely check out that video with all of those recommendations. I totally stand behind all of them. But I feel like it is especially timely to make this video because I feel like there is a subset of us readers who enjoy romances, who enjoy relationships in our fantasy novels. But for some reason, when it is categorized as romantasy, or at least the current iteration of romantasy books, just isn't exactly what we're looking for. So I'm on a bit of a journey this year to find more romantasy books that do work for me, that do work for those of us who just like, this isn't it. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you some books with romantic subplots that you can get behind. I am going to go through in order of how much of a focus the relationship is in the book. So starting with ones where it's like really much more of a subplot, building up to ones where I feel like could actually be categorized as romantasy books. The first of which here is Foul Days, but I will say that I think in order to like really get full satisfaction on the relationship, you do need to read the sequel to this as well, Monstrous Nights. So this is a duology that came out, both books came out last year in 2024. I have a full review for Foul Days you can check out if you are interested. This is set in an Eastern European inspired setting, and more specifically it's inspired a little bit by the Berlin Wall. It is a completely fantasy setting here. We're in an enclosed city that is walled in to protect or to keep in the monsters that can ravage this city for 12 days every year at the new year. And the walled in element keeps the monsters from getting out. However, it does obviously impact the people who live within the wall. Our main character is Kasara, and at the beginning of the book, she is put in this pressure cooker situation at the very beginning of the Foul Days where her monstrous and abusive ex-boyfriend has tracked her down, and she winds up bargaining a chance to get out of the city in exchange for her shadow, which is the source of her magic as a witch. She finds herself inserted into a bit of a murder investigation that seems to have a magical component and that might be impacted or that might be related to the loss of her own shadow. So she winds up connecting with this detective named Arson. The relationship is really light, or like the focus on the relationship between Kasara and Arson is very minimal in the first book and more extends into the second book. In the first book, it is definitely more just going from Kasara wanting absolutely nothing to do with Arson, not in an angsty, like, we're enemies kind of a way, but more in just like, I'm gonna take care of this by myself over here, and keeps trying to ditch Arson, to then like a begrudging, reluctant allies, to trustworthiness, to working together, and where occasionally she notices that like, okay, fine, his eyes look really great in this lighting. But overall, I really appreciated the communication between the two. These are older characters who have history, who have pasts, who have romantic pasts, and I appreciated watching them learn to trust and to work through their hang-ups over the course of the duology. And in the second book, you additionally get Arson's perspective as well, so you get more of that insight on what he's thinking and what he's feeling and the things that he thinks and ponders and notices about Kasara as well. Next up, I have Godkiller by Hannah Kaner, and I'm going to say that this is an incomplete trilogy. It is coming out this April, so it's perfect timing if you want to pick up this series, but I'm just saying that because I don't know how the situation ends. But in Godkiller, the relationship between Kerstin and Elo is really great. It is very slow and gradual as well over the course of the first book. Things are by no means like declarative or anything by the end of the first book. And there's a little bit of like physical separation, physical distance in the second book that is going to impact like how much the relationship is part of the story here. So again, that's why it's like number 2 out of however many it is that I have here. We do get both POVs as well as some additional ones for the story. Kerstin is a god killer in this country where the worship of various gods has been banned because the worship of them gives them power, and the gods in the past have manipulated that fact. But at the beginning of the story, Kerstin winds up connecting with this little girl, Onara, who has a god, the god of white lies, tethered to her, which is very strange. And Kerstin is trying to figure out a way of separating the two. And on their journey, they wind up connecting with Elo, who is a retired knight on one last quest for his king. The reason that I really enjoyed, or one of the things that I really enjoyed about the relationship between Kerstin and Elo, is that, again, it is people who don't necessarily like each other at the beginning of the story when they first meet, but it's by no means like a hate to love that happens way too fast. It's more people who like have reason to dislike each other from shared history or shared world history, let's say, who then slowly over time become like begrudging allies who learn to trust each other. I'm feeling a little bit repetitive. This is also something I liked about Foul Days. But begrudging allies who learn to trust each other. There's an element of caretaking involved going on here as well, as they both care about Anara, the young girl that they are traveling with. So there's that element of like shared responsibility and caretaking for this young girl. There are really, really great experiences over the course of the whole book that knit this group together as a found family, with kind of like Kerstin and Elo at the head. Like, by no means like parental roles here or anything, but they're definitely like the leaders of this little found family. I thought that they had really, really great mature communication, which is something that is always gonna win me over, to be honest, in a book with a romantic pairing. It's been a while since I don't remember the specific like timeline of their ages, but they definitely are both like over 30. And there are times when there could be that like classic miscommunication or like not sharing of information where they get frustrated and then they're like, okay, wait, like let's bring this down, like let's step aside over here, like what's going on here, like let's talk about this. And I just love that. I love good communication. It is so great. So because there is physical separation for plot reasons in the second book, we don't get to see this pairing quite as much, but I anticipate that we're going to come back around full circle in Faithbreaker. But again, like I don't know how this pairing ends, but at the end of Godkiller, I am definitely rooting for these two to be together. And I think you will too. There's a couple in the latter half of this list that honestly are a little bit surprising that they're in the latter half of this list as like more romantic, because they're also books that I wouldn't otherwise have expected as being romantic, and perhaps you didn't expect them to be romantic either from reading the synopsis. So the first one that I'm going to say here is then Asunder by Kerstin Hall. Well, this was on so many favorites of 2024. It is a new release from last year, and it doesn't immediately, like the synopsis doesn't immediately scream this has a romance in it. But in this book, we are following Karis Eska, who is a death speaker. She has this like compact with this like eldritch being who gives her the ability to look past the veneer to speak to people who have recently passed away. But it also, like, in exchange for that, she's going to eventually have to like serve him for eternity in his Lovecraftian graphic horror other realm kind of a situation. So there are these like really, really graphic, crazy Lovecraftian monster kind of gory elements or like moments of the story. But then the main part of the story is essentially Karis accidentally at the beginning, or like intentionally but with accidental consequences, winds up binding this man, Farain, to her shadow. And they two have to then like figure out how to separate each other without either of them dying, and they're also on the run because of the situation that was happening at the beginning of the book. I had no idea that this was going to have a romantic pairing in it at all, like that there was going to be a relationship of any weight in the story. So I'm not going to tell you like who the relationship is between, but I'm going to say that it was one that like slowly over the course of the book, the communication between the two was so respectful. It got better, it got more mutually respectful, let's say. It grew in friendship, it grew in an ability to trust each other and being there for each other, and not like, but also very respective of boundaries. So again, I'm not going to say who it is, because there were definitely points where I had started to question whether or not it was going to be a thing, but then also question whether or not it was going to be somebody else. So I don't want to give away who it is, and I will say that it does not have a satisfying conclusion if this is a first book. I have checked the author's website, I've checked Goodreads. It's not clear if there's a sequel, but it doesn't have this is the end of a standalone kind of an ending. So I'm giving you this recommendation with the fact that like I'm not certain that this is going to be a great ending for you. But this got surprisingly more romantic than I initially expected, and it's not something that I thought from reading the synopsis, so I'm going to give you the option to also pick up this amazing book. The other one here that, again, I would never have anticipated, oh, I have it. Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar is a book that I definitely was not anticipating to be as romantic as it was. This is a grimdark book where the initial inciting plot event is our main character discovering the body of a mutilated child. So I really wasn't expecting this to be romantic. Like I can't stress that enough. But also, it's the second, third top book on this list. It was deeply romantic, but set in a very grim, dark setting where real life world stuff that's going on is dark. We're following Teshue. We also get perspective from other people as well, including our love interest, Stella. Teshue is somebody who works for the authority, and in this world, they regulate the people who have magic, which is called talent by people with magic and taintedness by people who do not. And they have very, very strict rules about what they're allowed to do and all of those things. And it's one of those kinds of worlds. And Teshue gets embroiled into a bit of a political situation, not only with this discovery of this child who nobody seems to care about, nobody seems to want answers as to what happened to this child, but also just with the political situation that is changing with his job, as well as the situation with Stella. Stella is somebody who has talent, and she is, at the beginning of the book, assigned to him. He's his caseworker, essentially. He is her caseworker, essentially. He's had a crush on her, they're neighbors. Stella has a young daughter. It's all very, very sweet. It builds and builds and builds with this tenseness when we are in either of their perspectives and they're noticing each other. It has this just amazing sense of longing and a little bit sensualness, and again on this very grim, dark backdrop or setting and otherwise world politics or just politics that are going on. So it kind of is almost about, or at least this relationship is about, two people finding each other at a challenging period of time in their lives, at a challenging period of time situationally. Obviously there's at the beginning, Teshue is very worried about the power dynamic element of the relationship. He's very respectful of that, very aware of that fact. It's about finding love despite all of those very real potential obstacles, and the way in which that affects the decision making that they do over the course of the book in regards to their relationship, as well as other things that are happening. This was one of only 4 5-star books that I gave in 2024. It is a little bit steampunk or flintlock. I'm not quite sure of the genre there. I gave the comparison to the Peaky Blinders kind of gritty feel, where they have industrial revolution kind of stuff going on, but it's magically, powered. But grim, dark, gritty, definitely content warnings here regarding children and care and abuse with children. So know that going into it, but also surprisingly romantic, about finding love in difficult times. You should check it out. Second last book here is really actually just an author. You should definitely check out Juliet Marillier. At this point, the romantic relationship or the pairings in her book plays a much more significant role than in some of the other ones. It's sort of almost 50-50 by this point of the list. Anything that Juliet Marillier has written is almost certainly going to have an element of romance. I am going to refer you back to a video that I did in the past, Where to Start with Juliet Marillier. I think you should check that out if you are considering what book would be best for you to pick up. Her works are going to fall more into the historical fantasy genre, where she is setting things in the real world, but with kind of the folklore elements of the time being real. And the plots and the worlds then generally are less epic in scale and more smaller, close-knit problems, magical or local political kind of problems. She puts her characters through the ringer. They always generally tend to deal with really tough situations. They are always very strong female main characters. All of her books are going to have a really strong fantasy plot and problem and situation, and a really, really strong romance as well. So again, I'll refer you back to that Where to Start with Juliet Marillier video that I've made in the past. You can explore specifically which book of hers that you're going to want to check out. but that is definitely something that you should consider. If you like fantasy books with romance in them, you should be reading Juliet Marillier. The very last book that I'm going to recommend here is one that I technically would consider romantasy, but I will say that I will acknowledge that the genre here is a little bit tough, but it's one where we have a magical, fantastical, political plot and situation, but where also the romance, the relationship between our two main characters is also extremely important to the overall progression and arc of the story and the journey that our characters are on. So in this book, we are following Elle and Luke. The backdrop here is a contemporary world, it is our contemporary world, but where various magical beings exist, they're just secret. And there is this agency that helps all of these magical beings have work. Elle makes magical spells, and Luke is high up kind of within the Secret Service agency sort of this agency. And he is a longtime customer and acquaintance of Elle. The two are kind of forced to acknowledge, or at least they're given more opportunities to acknowledge the potential that there is there between them when Luke comes in to ask for a new spell from her, and the job is in fact hunting down her younger brother, who is an escaped criminal, kind of. This is, again, a relationship where our characters are mature people who have great communication over the course of the book. It is also a little bit almost like a contemporary romance, not in the contemporary setting, which doesn't really play a big role here, but it's like a contemporary romance in the fact that both of our main characters have stuff going on in their lives. And it is a personal growth journey for both of them individually, concurrently as a pairing on the way through. I'm sorry, the lighting has completely changed suddenly, but they're both given the opportunity to work through their baggage over the course of this book and are forced to kind of confront things from the past. And I generally felt like it was done in a really, really positive way over the course of the book, where at various times one of them or the other would be having a little bit of a hang up, a little bit of a situation where their thing, their personal growth and journey story was the focus, and the other one was always felt really positive and respective, and again, great communication, as they were very open with each other that things were a little bit complicated, but that they obviously had this feeling between them. It does get a little bit graphic on page in terms of intimacy, as did Legacy of the Brightwash. I didn't say that. And there is kind of on-page depiction of a mental health crisis, I would say, like a deep depressive state of being is on page and plays a big part of this. This book is so underhyped and more people need to be reading it, especially people who like romance, who like relationships and that focus in their fantasy books. If it is not the style of what is really, really hyped and popular right now, then it could be this instead. And this isn't being grouped up with those other things because it's pretty different. It's not those angsty things. It's better and different and something new and unique. And again, more people should be reading it. All right, there you have it, my list of fantasy books with romantic subplots you can root for 2.0. Hit me up in the comments if you've read any of these before, or if you similarly aren't jiving with the hyped romance that is out there. And if you have a recommendation similar to this, let's share with each other in the comments down below, because I am certain you're not alone in that fact, and that you, like others like me, are looking for more recommendations like this, where it's a great fantasy world and story and plot, but also with a relationship that has that takes up a little bit more of the focus. That is everything for me today. I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to follow and like if you like what I do here. Have a great day. Bye.